The hall was grand, with high walls and shining lights. Alien nobles filled the room, dressed in gold and silver robes. Their voices were loud, full of laughter. They were not laughing with joy. They were laughing at someone. In the center of the hall, a girl was being dragged by two guards. Her clothes were torn and covered in dirt. Her hair was messy and her face was tired. She looked weak, but her eyes still held a quiet fire. This girl was not always like this. Once she had stood in this hall with pride. She was born from noble blood. But now she was nothing to them. One noble pointed at her and laughed. "Look at her now, once a princess, now a beggar." Another shouted, "She should crawl, not walk in here." The guards pushed her harder. She fell. The hall echoed with cruel laughter. No one helped her. No one showed kindness. Not one noble stepped forward. They all believed she was guilty of betrayal. They said she had sold secrets to the enemy. But the truth was never spoken. She had been framed by those close to her, jealous of her power and respect. Now the same nobles who once praised her were the ones mocking her. Among the crowd stood a human. He was quiet, alone, and unknown to most. He wore no noble robe. His clothes were plain, but his eyes were sharp. He watched everything. The laughter, the cruelty, the fall of the girl. He did not smile. He did not speak. But something in his eyes burned. The girl looked up and saw him. For a moment their eyes met. She didn't know why, but there was something different about this human. He looked at her not with hate, but with sorrow. That moment passed quickly as the guards pulled her up again. The nobles continued their show. One noble, wearing a blue crown, stepped forward and said loudly, "Let this be a lesson. This is what happens to traitors." He raised his hand and the guards threw the girl to the floor again. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She only lay there, breathing slowly. The human stepped forward. Just one step. A few nobles noticed him and frowned. "What is a human doing here?" One whispered. "Ignore him," said another. "He's just a guest. He won't do anything." But they were wrong. The girl coughed and tried to sit up. Her arms were shaking. Her lips were dry. She looked around the hall. So many faces she once knew. None of them helped. Not one friend. Not one voice spoke for her. She closed her eyes and waited for the next kick. But something changed. The hall went silent. She opened her eyes and saw something she didn't expect. The human was walking toward her. He moved slowly, calmly. Every step made the nobles more confused. "What is he doing?" one of them hissed. "Stop him!" shouted another. But no one moved. The human stopped. Beside the girl, he knelt down and took off his coat. Without a word, he placed it under her head like a pillow. She stared at him, confused. No one had touched her with care in a long time. "Why are you helping me?" she whispered. He looked at her with steady eyes and replied, "Because no one else will." Gasps filled the room. Nobles stood up in shock. "This is a shame," someone yelled. "Humans are not allowed to touch fallen nobles." But the human didn't listen. He took her hand gently. She was cold, very cold. But he didn't let go. For the first time in many years, the girl felt something warm. Not in her body, but in her heart. She didn't know his name. He didn't know hers. But in that moment, a bond had started. The nobles didn't understand. But they would soon. This human was not here to watch. He was here to change everything, and he had just taken his first step. No one moved. The alien noble stared, frozen in shock, as the human stayed on one knee beside the disgraced girl. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He simply stood up, slowly, and lifted her in his arms, like she was weightless. Her body was weak, but she felt safer in that moment than she had in years. Whispers spread across the hall like wildfire. Did he just touch her? A human? Has he gone mad? This is an insult to our traditions. The noble with the blue crown stepped forward. His voice boomed across the silent room. "Put her down, human. This is not your concern." She's trash. The human looked straight at him, calm and quiet. She's not trash, he said in a low voice. She's someone. The blue-crowned noble's face turned red. You will regret this. Guards. 10 alien guards stepped forward, blocking the human's path. Their weapons were raised. The girl in his arms stirred and whispered, "Leave me. They'll kill you." He didn't answer. His grip didn't change. One guard rushed forward, but he never reached the human. In one fast motion, the human turned, used his elbow, and struck the guard's helmet. The alien fell like a stone. Another came. Then another. 3 seconds later, 3 guards were on the floor. The hall was no longer quiet, it was full of chaos. He's attacking us. Stop him. He's just one man. Yes, one man. But he was moving like a ghost. Quiet, fast, unstoppable. Every strike was clean. Every move had purpose. He didn't try to kill, but he didn't miss either. The nobles were used to power, through politics and words. This was something else, something they didn't understand. The girl clung to him, her breath shaking. She had seen many fighters in her life, but never like this. He wasn't just strong, he was careful, controlled, like he had done this before, many times. Within a minute, the path to the grand door was clear. The human kept walking. The nobles shouted behind him, "You'll be hunted. This is treason. You'll die for this." He didn't look back. The girl, still in his arms, spoke softly. "Why are you doing this?" His answer came after a pause. Because someone had to. The door closed behind them. The noise faded. For the first time in a long time, the girl was outside the palace walls. She looked up at the sky. It was cloudy, cold, but somehow, the air felt free. She asked again, more softly, "Who are you?" The human didn't say his name. He only said, "A stranger who saw enough." Her eyes blinked slowly. She wanted to ask more, but sleep pulled her down. Her body gave in to rest. But her heart felt something new. Hope. Back in the hall, the nobles stood in stunned silence. The guards groaned on the floor. The blue-crowned noble stared at the door, jaw tight. "This isn't over," he said. "That human has started a war." But far away, walking through the quiet streets of the alien capital, the human wasn't thinking of war. He was thinking of one girl, one moment, one step that changed everything. The city lights flickered, like dying stars. In the quiet back streets of the alien capital, the human moved fast, carrying the broken girl in his arms. She was light, too light, like someone who hadn't eaten in days. Her eyes opened for a second, caught the blur of buildings passing by, then closed again. Alarms hadn't started yet, but they would. The human turned sharply into a narrow alley. He knew time was short. The nobles wouldn't let this go. They'd send guards, drones, maybe even assassins, not because they cared about the girl, but because she was a symbol they had tried to destroy. And now someone was carrying that symbol out in the open. He stopped at a sealed door, pressed, his hand against the panel. It scanned him, then clicked open. He stepped inside, a dark, hidden shelter deep beneath the city's old transport lines. Inside, the warmth was soft but enough. He laid the girl on a small bed, then sat beside her. She was asleep, her face calm for once. A scar ran across her cheek. He wondered how many times she had been hit. He opened a pack and pulled out a small med spray. Carefully, he cleaned her wounds and gave her water. She moved slightly, eyes fluttering. "Where are we?" she whispered. "Safe," he replied. "For now." She tried to sit, but her arms failed. "You could have left me." "I know," he said. "But you didn't." "No." Her voice was shaky. "Do you even know who I am?" He nodded. "Your name was once spoken with pride. You were a voice of peace between species. until your own people crushed you for it. Tears filled her eyes, not because of pain, but because someone remembered. I tried to stop the war, she whispered. They said I was weak, that I betrayed them. I was only trying to protect lives. That was my crime. And for that, the human said softly, they tried to erase you. She looked at him closely. Why would a human care about an alien like me? He leaned back, staring at the ceiling. Because I once knew a woman like you. She saved me when I was a boy during the early battles. She was alien too, she was killed for it. Silence filled the room. The girl asked quietly, what happened to you after that? I survived, he said. Barely. Then I promised myself, if I ever saw injustice like that again, I wouldn't walk away. Her lips trembled. So I remind you of her? No, he said, meeting her eyes. You remind me that not all lights have to go out. Outside, the sirens began. The nobles had finally reacted. Inside, the girl tried to sit again. This time, she succeeded. Her body was still weak, but her eyes were brighter. They'll come for us, she said. They will, he agreed, and we'll be ready. Her head tilted. We? He smiled just a little. You're not alone anymore. The girl looked at her bruised hands. They had once worn rings of gold. Now they were scarred, but something inside her began to return, an old fire buried under years of shame. I don't want to run forever, she whispered. Then we don't run, he said. We fight. She breathed deep and nodded. If I fall again, I'll help you stand, he said, every time. That night, while the city searched for two fugitives deep underground, something powerful was reborn. Not a princess, not a soldier, but a survivor, with a reason to rise again. She woke to silence. For the first time in years, there was no shouting, no chains, no cold floor under her body. Just warmth, stillness, and the sound of someone quietly boiling water in the corner. She sat up slowly. Her arms still shook. But she didn't fall this time. The human turned when he saw her awake. He gave a small nod and placed a hot cup beside her bed. Drink. You need strength. She looked at the cup, then at him. You didn't leave. I said I wouldn't, he replied. She picked up the cup with both hands. It felt heavy. Her voice was quiet. You're strange for a human. He sat down across from her. You're strange for a noble. They both smiled for the first time. It was small, broken, but real. She took a sip and leaned back. I wasn't always like this. Weak, hated, dirty. I know, he said. Tell me what happened. Her eyes drifted to the corner of the room as if searching through memories she didn't want to touch. They called me Peaceborn. My father was High Council. My mother was from a warrior bloodline. I believed in ending the wars between alien worlds and humans. I thought we could build something better. She paused. They hated me for it. The human waited. No pressure. No judgment. Just silence, ready to catch every word. I spoke at the Unity Summit. I begged them to stop the war. I offered plans, made deals behind closed doors. They smiled in front of me. And then, one by one, they destroyed everything. My name, my family, my place in the court. They said I betrayed the empire. They lied, the human said. She nodded slowly. But the lie became truth. No one stood for me, not even my old friends. I was dragged from my home. They made me watch as my sister took my place. She smiled while I was stripped of my title. And then, silence. Years of it. The human clenched, his jaw, his hand rested on the hilt of a blade at his belt. They erased you from history. Her voice cracked. Yes, he looked at her closely. But you're still here, still breathing. That matters. She gave a weak laugh. Sometimes I wished I wasn't. He leaned forward. I used to wish the same. Her eyes met his. What happened to you? He looked away for a moment, then back. I was a soldier, young, proud. I believed what I was told, that aliens were monsters. Then one day during a raid I was injured, left behind. I should have died. But someone helped you? She guessed. Yes, he said. A woman. She looked like you. She hid me, fed me, treated my wounds. Her own people found out. They burned her alive. The girl gasped. Her hand covered her mouth. I'm sorry. He nodded. I ran. I survived, but I never forgot her. That day changed everything. I stopped fighting in the war. I started saving who I could, quietly from the shadows. But you, he paused. You were different. I didn't save you out of guilt. I saved you because you didn't deserve to fall. Tears rolled down her face. She didn't wipe them away. No one has ever said that to me. Then they were blind, he said. She looked down at her hands. What now? I'm still hunted, still hated. He stood and walked to the door of the small shelter. They fear what they tried to destroy, but fear doesn't last forever. You've been broken, yes, but you're not gone. You can still rise. She stood too, though her knees were weak. And you'll help me? I already did, he said. The next step is yours. She looked at her reflection in a broken mirror nearby. Her face was thinner, her body marked with scars, but she saw something she hadn't seen in years. Herself. The self-aware girl who once dreamed of peace and wasn't dead. She was waking up, and this time she had someone beside her. Her face was on every screen, not as a hero, not as a noble, but as a target. The message came from the Imperial Palace itself. Fugitive spotted with human rebel, wanted alive, for trial and punishment. The words flashed across news panels in red bold letters. Her old name was back on their tongues, but soaked in lies and venom. She watched the broadcast from the shadows of a ruined rooftop. The city below buzzed with fear. The Empire wanted her captured. The people? They didn't know what to believe. Beside her, the human adjusted the power cell in his stolen weapon. His expression was calm, but his body was tense. He had expected this. She hadn't. They're serious, she said, her voice low. They always are. When they're afraid. He replied. She turned to him. Afraid of me? No, he said. Afraid of what you represent. She looked down at her hands. Still, scarred, still shaking sometimes, but not as weak as before. She had begun to move differently. Eat, speak, think, as if her body was slowly remembering who she used to be. But she wasn't the same. She had been broken, yes. But now she was sharpening into something new. They'll come in waves, the human said. First spies, then hunters, then assassins. They won't stop. She nodded. Then we won't stop either. That night, they didn't sleep. They moved from place to place. Underground paths, forgotten tunnels, secret doors, only rebels. Remembered. Word spread fast. Some doors closed to them, others opened. Quiet hands gave food. Eyes offered silent thanks. Many remembered her, and many more were starting to believe the old stories were lies. But the Empire moved quicker. By morning, wanted posters glowed across every district. Drones scanned every street. Agents sniffed. Through the slums. One wrong move and they'd be surrounded. They were resting in a burnt-out shelter when they heard the first step. The human stood instantly. They're here. 3 armored hunters entered without warning. Quiet, smooth, deadly. No words, just action. The girl didn't hide. She stood beside the human. For the first time, she wasn't waiting to be saved. She was ready to fight, the way. Human threw the first strike. She followed with the second. It was fast and brutal. The hunters were trained killers, but they weren't ready for 2 targets moving as one. She fought with fire. Not perfect, not smooth, but powerful. A kick to the ribs, A strike to the neck. She moved like someone who had suffered long enough in near. The end, all three hunters lay unconscious. The girl stood over them, breathing hard. She touched her chest, surprised she was still standing. "You did it," the human said. She nodded slowly. "I didn't freeze this time." "No," he said. "You rose." But there was no time to celebrate. More would come. Each hour brought new threats, traps, lies, warnings sent to nearby cities. The human and the girl became shadows, ghosts the Empire couldn't catch. But each move they made also sparked something else. Hope. People began whispering her name again. Quietly. Carefully. But it was enough. She's alive. She escaped. She's not what they said she was. The Empire tried to control the story, but the truth was slipping through their hands. And the hunted girl? She no longer looked like prey. She looked like a storm gathering speed. The trial was meant to be a warning. The Empire announced it across every world under its rule. The traitor noble will face judgment. All may witness her fall. But they made one mistake. She was no longer the same girl who once crawled on their marble floors. The human stood beside her, silent but watchful, as the stolen transport ship landed on the capital's outskirts. The skies were gray, the air heavy. The Empire believed they were dragging her back in chains. They didn't know. She was coming by choice. She walked with her back straight, head high, and a fire in her eyes that hadn't been there for years. The Empire wanted to humiliate her again, but this time the audience would see her differently. From across the galaxy, citizens gathered to watch. Some cheered the Empire. Others whispered behind closed doors, watching the hidden streams that rebels had leaked videos of her escape, of her kindness, of her courage, and now here she was, walking into their trap. Willingly. Inside the grand court, the same nobles stood where they once mocked her. Their robes shimmered. Their faces were cold. The blue-crowned noble stepped forward. "You dare show your face here again?" He spat. She didn't blink. "I came to speak, and the people came to listen." He laughed cruelly. "You'll speak only your guilt." The human handed her a small device. She turned it on. Holograms lit up the air, secret recordings, stolen files, messages proving her innocence. Her voice remained steady as she revealed each betrayal, named each corrupt noble, and exposed every false charge. The court gasped. The people watching from far-off cities leaned forward. The blue-crowned noble shouted, "Lies!" But the truth had already been seen. One by one, other nobles turned pale. Some backed away. Some ran. Outside, the crowd began to murmur louder. Something had shifted. This wasn't a trial. This was a reckoning. "I was cast down," she said clearly. "I was silenced, beaten, forgotten. But truth does not die, it waits, and today it speaks." The people roared. The guards didn't move. Even they had heard enough. The blue-crowned noble drew his blade. "You should have stayed in the shadows." The human stepped forward, but she stopped him. "No," she said. "This is my fight now." The noble rushed her, but she was ready. She moved like someone who had trained in darkness, who had learned pain, who had survived more than he ever would. She blocked, struck, spun, until his blade clattered to the floor. He fell to his knees. Funny, Court stared in silence. She looked down at him. "This is not revenge, this is truth." Then she turned her back on him. She walked to the center of the court and raised her voice. "I do not want your throne. I want justice. I want peace. And I want every child to grow up in a galaxy where kindness is not a crime." People across the Empire heard her, and they believed her. The forgotten noble had risen again, not as a servant, not as a symbol, but as a voice the galaxy could no longer ignore. And beside her stood the human, quiet, loyal and proud. Together they had done what no one thought possible. Together they had done what no one thought possible. They had changed the course of history. The Empire didn't fall in a day, but that day something powerful broke. Not a wall, not a weapon, but silence. The girl who had once been dragged in, shame was now standing in front of millions, free, fearless, and no longer alone. Across the galaxy, voices rose with hers, small at first, then stronger. Her name became a whisper of hope, and a warning to those who still ruled with fear. She had no army, no throne, no fancy title, but she had something more powerful: truth, and the human who believed in her when no one else did. He stood behind her, not for attention, not for power, but because he never wanted her to fall again. In the weeks that followed, the nobles who had betrayed her were arrested or forced into hiding. Cities once ruled by fear slowly began to open. Treaties were rewritten. War plans were burned. She visited orphan camps and border towns. She didn't wear royal robes. She wore plain clothes and walked on foot. People cried when they saw her. Some fell to their knees. She lifted them up with her own hands and said, "No more kneeling. Stand with me." And they did. Everywhere she went, the human walked beside her. Quiet, watchful. The protectors called him the silent shield. Children called him the kind giant. He never cared for names. His only purpose was her safety. One evening, as they looked over the glowing city from a quiet rooftop, she broke the silence. "You didn't know me when you helped me," she said. "I was nothing. Broken. Why did you care?" He looked at her, serious. "You were never nothing. But you risked everything," she whispered. "For me." "I didn't do it to save a noble," he said. "I did it because no one else would, and because someone once did the same for me." She smiled. "Then maybe that's how it starts. One person caring when no one else does." Nodded. "It always starts small." She looked at him then, not as a protector or a soldier or a rebel, but as the reason she stood. "I think," she said, "you reminded me who I was before they tried to erase me." "And who are you now?" he asked softly. She turned back to the city, her voice full of quiet strength. "Someone who stands." He didn't answer. He just stood beside her like he always had. And in the heart of a galaxy once ruled by cruelty, two souls stood side by side. One who had lost everything, and one who gave everything so she could rise again. Together, they had turned laughter into silence, chains into courage, and a single step into a future worth fighting for.